Just when you thought that the corporate media could not sink any lower, they managed to find a new way to disgrace themselves. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you for Reason to Resist on January 24th, 2026. In this episode, we'll examine a stunning new example of journalistic cowardice from Canada's national broadcaster, the CBC. In this case, the subject of the CBC's coverage is the recent protests in Iran. But before we get into it, let me remind you that if you find this video to be informative, please like and share it. And if you're not already a subscriber of Reason to Resist, we warmly encourage you to become one. So let's get to it then. Earlier this month, the CBC's main political commentary program, Power and Politics, interviewed the president of the Iranian-Canadian Congress, or ICC. Her name is Mona Ghassemi, and we'll be speaking with Mona in a few minutes. To the great chagrin of Power and Politics host David Cochrane, Mona dared to say the truth, namely that a major reason for the protests in Iran was the crushing impact of illegal Western sanctions on the country. Mona then committed what Cochrane apparently regarded as blasphemy by repeating what former CIA Director Mike Pompeo has himself acknowledged, namely that Israel's Mossad was on the ground working with some of the protesters. And here you can see a January 2nd, 2026, from the former CIA Director himself, saying the Iranian regime is in trouble, bringing in mercenaries is its last best hope, riots in dozens of cities, 47 years of this regime. Happy New Year to every Iranian in the streets, also to every Mossad agent walking beside them. And by the way, that was not the only acknowledgement from US or Israeli officials that the Mossad was involved in these protests, but we'll come back to that in a moment. So what did the CBC do in response to this interview? Well, first of all, it was bombarded with complaints from opponents of the Iranian government, many of whom, as we've recently covered on Reason to Resist, are Zionists who support the son of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi. And having received those complaints, the CBC and David Cochrane in particular decided basically to grovel for forgiveness. Without allowing Mona to defend her position, Power and Politics interviewed another Iranian Canadian who is hostile to the Iranian-Canadian Congress. That individual, University of Toronto linguistics professor Arslan Khanamouipour, denied that the Mossad had anything to do with the protests and pretended that sanctions had nothing to do with the suffering of the Iranian people. He also savaged the reputation of the Iranian-Canadian Congress. Throughout the interview, Cochrane apologized no less than 4 times for interviewing Mona. As we speak with Mona about these developments, we'll show you clips from her interviews. And before I bring her into the discussion, I do want to say a few words about the CBC. Some of you might take issue with my characterizing the CBC as corporate media. It is, after all, owned and controlled by the state. But I contend that that doesn't mean that the CBC is free from corporate influence and the dictates of the billionaire class. More than 20% of the CBC's revenue comes from corporate advertising. And here you can see the CBC's quarterly report for the second quarter of 2025. And I've highlighted in blue the revenue line. That's advertising amounting to $102 million for the quarter. And you'll see underneath that, 377 million approximately of government funding. So the advertising revenue accounts for in excess of 20% of the CBC's overall financial resources. Now, quite apart from the fact that the CBC is significantly dependent for the funding of its operations on the corporatocracy, the government itself, which is, or the state, which is the owner of the CBC, I maintain is largely controlled or at least disproportionately influenced by the billionaire class. And that inevitably impacts how the government deals with the CBC. Canada's current Prime Minister, Mark Carney himself, is a wealthy former Goldman Sachs banker. Moreover, the chief fundraiser for the governing Liberal Party, the party that has been in power for more than a decade and has, along with the even more right-wing conservatives, dominated Canadian federal politics for the entire post-World War II period. The chief fundraiser for this Liberal Party is none other than Stephen Bronfman. And you can see him here pictured along with his bosom buddy, former Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, also of the Liberal Party. And this particular article from none other than the CBC in 2017 talked about how Stephen Bronfman had been linked to a Cayman Islands tax scheme. That story, by the way, quickly disappeared from the Canadian media. So not only does Bronfman have ungodly wealth, but he is also, as many of you will know, a fanatical Zionist. And so the bottom line is this: the CBC's richly compensated star media personalities like David Conklin know where their bread is buttered. The CBC is indeed a corporate media outlet. Now, let's bring Mona into the conversation to talk in some detail about what happened in her interactions with the CBC. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mona.
Thank you, Dimitri. So happy to be here, and thank you for the important context.
We're gratified to give you an opportunity to do what the CBC has not done, which is to respond to the attacks of this linguistics professor. Just to simplify things, I'm going to refer to him by his first name, no disrespect intended, Arsalan, because his last name is a bit challenging for me. But in any case, Mona, you are the president of the Iranian-Canadian Congress. Can you start by telling us about the organization?
Absolutely. So the organization, Iranian-Canadian Congress, was founded in 2007. It's a non-profit, non-religious, and non-partisan organization intended to help Iranian Canadians in Canada, and we do things like, advocate for better immigration policies, like improving the condition of Iranian Canadians, and also establishing diplomatic relations between Iran and Canada. This is important in order to have that understanding, and it really eases the life for Iranian Canadians traveling, visiting family, and that's among the many other activities we do. It's an independent organization. We have very limited funding that comes mostly from our membership fees, a small membership fee. It's about $20. It used to be $10. It's very minimal, and just donations, and most of that goes towards things like running our website. It's very limited budgets, and everyone in this organization, I'm so proud to be part of this organization. People are very lovely, very intelligent people, and they're all professionals who have their own lives, have their own families, and are so dedicated to spend so many hours like working for the benefit of the people, the Iranian Canadians.
Right. And can you tell us, and by the way, I've known your organization for many years, and I certainly have the same feelings about the many members whom I've met. I've always been impressed with the level of sophistication, the education, all of the ICC members I've interacted with. I had the impression they were secular and that they were rather progressive in their political orientation. There may well be exceptions to that, but that's certainly been my experience, and I've known the ICC for years. Could you tell us what the organization's position is on Western sanctions on Iran?
Yes. So we base our statements, our policies on facts, and the facts are that sanctions are designed to create difficulty and unrest among the peoples of the populations of the countries that they target, and there's documentation of this, and the people imposing the sanctions know this. So we have always been against sanctions because we consider it a kind of economic warfare. They mainly affect normal people and not the governments directly. And we have seen the effects over last several years. Even before I joined the ICC, I was aware of this and how difficult the conditions were for my family back in Iran. There's all kinds of things like difficulty access to medication. At one point, they were limiting flights. Europe was not refueling the flights, so you could only go through Qatar. There's all these so many ways in which there's pressure on Iran in a way that affects normal, average, everyday people.
I think it's a good point for me to remind our audience, I've talked about this previously, that the prestigious British medical journal, The Lancet, put out a study a few months ago estimating that the number of people killed by sanctions, U.S. sanctions, from 1971 to 2021, a 50-year period, averaged approximately 500,000 per year. That totals to between 25 million and 30 million people. Killed just as a result of sanctions, putting aside all of the military aggression that the United States has engaged in. So I think that's important context for people considering how these sanctions are affecting the Iranian people. And I want to come back to the question of sanctions later, and something that U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had to say about this at the World Economic Forum in Davos. But before we get there, let's talk then about your interview with the Power and Politics program at the CBC. How did that interview come about, Mona?
Yeah, so they usually, when things are tense in Iran, we get some media requests, and we've received one from the Power and Politics team. It was, I think, maybe Tuesday, January 13th, I received the first email. Unfortunately, because of the time schedule on which they're going, I missed the initial time that they gave me, but I emailed them back, and they called me on the Thursday, and I had a live interview that evening. I was not able to do it during the day, so they said, okay, you can do the evening, and it will be a live interview. And I welcomed that, because in the past, when I've taken non-live interviews, sometimes they really tend to cut anything of substance. So I was actually quite pleased to receive the invitation, and that the fact that it was live worked, I think, to our advantage to get our message out. And the host was very lovely during the interview. I was not interrupted. I think maybe he might have been pushing for something that he didn't get. They told me I had 6 minutes, and actually, I think in the end it was closer to 10 minutes. And
Right.
and they even emailed me afterwards saying that it was an informative interview.
So let's look now at two aspects of the interview. The first part of the interview that I think was important was what you had to say about sanctions.
To the news of the death of a Canadian, one amongst many, but from this country. What are your thoughts there?
Well, of course, my heart goes out to his family. Sorry, I think that it was not mentioned, the gender of the individual, but my heart goes out to the family, as well as, of course, to anyone who has lost anyone either in the last several days or at any point. The Iranians within the country and in the diaspora have been going through a difficult time through several years, and especially also during the 12-day war that happened in June 2025. And of course, there's all kinds of turmoil, but I want to emphasize that Iran doesn't exist within a vacuum, and these currency issues are also affected by the long-term severe sanctions that are led by the U.S. and placed on the country. So it's a quite perfect storm of various issues. And I hope the best for everyone, and I hope that we come out of this standing stronger as a society, both for Iranians in Iran and the diaspora.
Now, I have to tell you, Mona, that when I watched this interview, I was absolutely amazed, because in all the years that I've been following Canadian media coverage, I mean, I would even expand that and say Western media coverage, whether it was US media, European mainstream media, so-called mainstream media. I don't think I've ever heard anybody actually say and get away with it the truth, which is that sanctions are having a terrible impact on innocent Iranians and are contributing to political unrest in the country. Okay. But as it turns out, within days of you giving this interview, Scott Bessent made the following remarks. This is the US Treasury Secretary at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports. And this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired. And things are moving in a very positive way here.
Okay, so that's why they took to the streets. This is exactly what Scott Bessent himself says. Mona, do you have any observations on this interesting admission by the Treasury Secretary?
Yes, thank you for including that. I was going to mention it if you hadn't, but it's very revealing, and it's actually quite upsetting because we've gotten so many negative, sort of spamming our Instagram and stuff like that, that's saying everything we say is lies, when it comes right from the horse's mouth. And what I said in the interview, as you might show later, I was quoting directly Israeli sources about Mossad. I don't say things, pardon my French, but I don't pull things out of my ass. It's just it's kind of shocking, the denial of the reality. And it's actually quite interesting to see the outright admission, how bold they are. It just, confirms what we always knew.
Yeah, it's like, the Canada's national broadcaster lives in an alternate reality. I mean, we're going to show what they have to say about your commentary in this interview that Cochrane subsequently did with Arsalan, but it's as though they don't read the news because Bessent himself is saying these things.
Yeah.
He couldn't be more explicit. In any case, let's now look at what you had to say about the involvement of the Mossad. And this was, to me, even more amazing that you were able to say this.
Any sense through your context of where things are right now?
Yes, of course, yes, the internet has been shut down, and this in response to the escalation of the protests into riots. With the protests began around, I understand it to be around the 28th of December, as a legitimate peaceful protests against issues with currency and various issues stemming from the long-term economic difficulties. And later on, they escalated into something more than that. And this is my understanding that's when the internet shutdown happened, and security forces intervened. And we know that these, as Haaretz has reported, as if we were to trust Mike Pompeo's bluster about that, Mossad is also involved in influence operations in Iran. So although, of course, Iranians have legitimate grievances, there is ample reporting. We understand that, as we saw the escalation of war back in June, there is an interest for foreign governments such as Israel and the United States, who want the current Iranian government to come out of power.
Now, I just want to stress, Mona, that you said several times in that interview that the protesters had legitimate grievances. You were also very clear in saying that at the beginning, the protests were peaceful. You didn't accuse the protesters, whom you said had legitimate grievances, of resorting to violence from the beginning. I think it was quite clear that what you were saying, consistently with Pompeo's tweet, is that at some stage, Mossad agents or people working with the Mossad became involved, and the protests then turned violent. Now, you referred to Haaretz. I just want to, this was not only Haaretz. I'm going to put up on the screen here this article from the Jerusalem Post. Mossad spurs Iran protests, says agents with demonstrators in Farsi message. As protests grow across Iran, the Mossad, I repeat, the Mossad posted an unusual Farsi message urging demonstrators to act, saying it is with them in the streets amid rising economic pressure and public unrest. So you don't have to take the ICC's word for it, folks. All you got to do is listen to the Israeli media and the Mossad itself. Anything you want to add here, Mona, before we look at what Arslan had to say about you?
Yeah. Yeah, so I even hedged my comments a little. I said if we're to trust Mike Pompeo's bluster. But yeah, we're seeing so many different reports of this. And I had seen that tweet by the Farsi language Mossad, but I didn't want to cite it because sometimes, you know, with Twitter at this point, it's not clear who's who. And I wasn't sure about whether the attribution was correct, but I did see that tweet, and I did later also see the Jerusalem Post article. So there's so much, and there's also, like, I've seen, you know, footage of older reporting of students in Israel being trained to learn Farsi specifically for these kinds of operations. So this is something that is well known, and you know, it's something that the Israelis like to show off.
Yeah. Apparently, the CBC and its enormous research staff don't have access to the Jerusalem Post or Mike Pompeo's tweets. But I wonder where all of that advertising money is going. So, in any case, Mona, now let's take a look at the interview of Arslan. I'm going to show the way I think we can best deal with this is we'll go from the beginning when Cochrane is groveling, and then we'll pause occasionally and give you an opportunity to respond to what Arslan says about you and the ICC, something that the CBC itself should have done. And by the way, before I do this, I just want to ask you something. At any point, has the CBC invited you to respond to Arslan's attack?
No, absolutely not. I would have hoped that perhaps instead of rushing to platform this person, that they would have at least sent us an email to allow us to send a response, or even appear on air again to be able to respond to his comments, but his defamation and all the strange statements he made that in no way actually addressed any of my statements, but simply were ad hominem attacks against the ICC.
Yeah.
Actually, I responded. I sent an email to David Cochrane's team. I believe the day after this aired, the interview with Mr. Arslan Kahnamaipour is, I think, his last name, and I have not received a response since either. We have also contacted the ombudsperson because it's, as you know, it's a flagrant lack of journalistic integrity to platform.
I'm curious, how did you find out about the interview of Arslan?
I think it was shared in one of my group chats with the people close to the ICC.
In other words, it wasn't the CBC that brought it to your attention.
No, absolutely not.
Wow. Okay, so let's watch this travesty.
Look, Arslan, you are one of hundreds of Iranian Canadians that we've heard from and that I've personally heard from with concerns over an interview we did on the show last week with the Iranian-Canadian Congress. And you criticized that interview for falling short of standards and really allowing a platform for the narrative of the Iranian regime. And Look, I'm not going to argue with you. Like, I expected an interview on that day, much like the one we are having here, talking about the regime cruelty and support for the protesters, and that's not what we delivered. And we fell short as a team, and I'm sorry about that. And I
Okay, you just apologized once. Listen.
fell short as a host, because I'm ultimately responsible for what happened. So this was it was a live interview, and it did not go as I expected, and I didn't react it as I would have hoped I would. So I do want to apologize to you
It's a second apology. He's not done.
for that, because I know this is a source of great consternation and some hurt, and that was not our intention, and I'm sorry that happened, and I'm
Third apology. He's still not finished.
glad you're here to sort of speak about it. So what did you want to say about that particular segment? Because I'm not defending it and not making excuses. I want to make it right.
Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate your honesty, and apologies accepted. But I have to say, when that news episode, that episode came out, I was inundated with messages. I don't think I've ever had as many messages from community members, all asking about what can be done.
I just want to pause there, Mona. Who is this guy? Why would people be sending him messages? Because I tried to do some research on him. He has a very, very limited social media presence. He doesn't appear to be at this time a representative of an official of any Iranian-Canadian organization, any advocacy group. Can you tell us a little bit about this man?
Well, in 2015 to 2016, he was the president of the Iranian-Canadian Congress.
Wow.
His wife was among a number of people who filed a lawsuit against the Iranian-Canadian Congress, which did not succeed, and the judge ruled in favor of the Congress. You know, I wasn't involved at the time, but I think they claimed that we were undemocratic, whatever, and the lawsuit failed. So he has a conflict of interest that has not been either disclosed by himself or the CBC.
Right, and so your understanding is, I mean, I've watched this interview a couple of times. I did not hear him say anywhere, nor did Cochrane, that he formally represented the Iranian-Canadian Congress. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
okay.
As I understand it, he was a member for a long time. This is before my time, before I was part of the organization myself. But people who know about this. And
have you ever actually met him?
I have not. He's based in Toronto, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm. And you're in Montreal.
They are also crediting him as an activist. I guess you can credit anyone as an activist, but I don't know about his activities.
Yeah, they say he's a human rights activist, which that's what prompted me. That Cochrane said this about him, and that's what prompted me to look on social media, where, as I said, he has like a Facebook account and Instagram account, which are say very little about political issues. He rarely posts. His LinkedIn account it just seems to be like a placeholder. There are no posts on it whatsoever. So it's a little unclear to me why he's being referred to as a human rights activist. But in any case, let's hear what he continues to say.
So I was one of hundreds of people who signed this letter that was sent to you, which you kindly responded to very quickly, basically objecting to the narrative that was, broadcast on your program, which essentially copied the narrative coming from the Islamic Republic.
How do you respond to that, Mona?
Well, let me go back a little, because I think this is really fascinating, the way when David Cochrane is apologizing, he says he was looking for a narrative like this one and he didn't get it. This is really like, what you say, saying the quiet part out loud. The mainstream media is always doing this. They're pushing the narrative, as you said, because they know where their bread is buttered. And it's interesting because this man kind of comes and cites these numbers about the number killed that have nothing to do with reality. I don't know if it's before or after, with no sources and so I'm actually quite dismayed by that, because whatever I said, I was citing several Israeli sources, and then he says that what I said on air was essentially copying the Islamic Republic narrative. So that's not where I'm getting my information, and it's a tool that has been used for a long time against the ICC and other people like us who advocate against war, to delegitimize us, to make an effort to delegitimize us, and to frighten people who might otherwise find us and be interested in joining us or in any way associating with us. It's used as a tool to limit our ability to put our message out and to incite fear within the diaspora.
Yeah, and this has been a time-honored tradition amongst the neocons and imperialists. It's not only in the case of Iran. Whenever people in the anti-war community, anti-imperialist community, whether it was Vietnam, whether it's the Ukraine war, whether it's what's going on in other parts of West Asia, whenever they critique the aggression and the barbarism of Western governments, they're accused of being aligned with the enemy, even if what they're saying is based, as you said, on sources other than the government that they're trying to destroy. So,
and can I add something here?
Sure.
I think these people, they really can't believe how we can come to these conclusions independently. You know, I've grown up in Canada my entire life. I've been educated in the Canadian system. I have, I have different degrees, both, I had a science bachelor's and a master's in in anthropology and the social science. So I know a little bit about media criticism and looking at where the money comes from and all of this. And it's just they just can't believe that people would come to these conclusions, or maybe they know and they are trying so hard and relying on people, sort of naively relying on this sort of black and white narrative.
I'm reminded of that famous comment by Upton Sinclair that it's impossible to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it.
I love that. Yeah, it's good.
Let's hear what else Arslan has to say.
I mean, all of the different pieces of that narrative can be debunked. The reality is that...
I just want to stop there, okay? All of the different pieces of your narrative can be debunked, he said, right? Now, you said repeatedly that the protesters have legitimate grievances. Is he saying that that's fake? Is he saying that he can debunk that? Isn't he agreeing with you?
I actually didn't catch that part.
It's amazing.
Look, they'll try whatever they can, and they deliberately try to. They don't address the important parts of my narrative. They don't address. They simply. What I realized after I did the interview, I myself thought, and some people around me who gave me feedback, a few people told me that I could have gone harder, right? And actually, I had deliberately made a strategic decision to avoid antagonizing some of the other Iranians in the diaspora who are advocating for war, who are pro-Pahlavi, which is very strange and completely at odds with any demands being made by Iranians in Iran. I deliberately wanted to avoid antagonizing these people, but I came to the conclusion that it didn't matter. And actually, I think it's good that, in my opinion, I was quite gentle and soft with the approach I took. And I think it's quite revealing, because it's really about what you don't say. If you don't say explicitly, I'm against, the regime, the Islamic Republic regime, they will come after you. This is the conclusion I've come to.
Yeah. So there's more to come. Here it is.
This was large-scale protests. We're talking about millions of Iranians coming to the streets. to ask, basically to demand the end of the Islamic Republic. That's what it comes down to. In the end, it might have started because of economic crisis. It might have, been various reasons, but we have had protests in Iran, a chain of protests starting at least going back to 2009, even before that.
Mona, do you agree with him that all of these people want an end to the Islamic Republic, or do you think that at least some of them are in principle supportive of the Islamic Republic, but they have specific complaints about government policy or failures or perhaps corruption? What's your view about this?
Yeah, I reject the notion that they claim that the majority of Iranians are against the Islamic Republic. I think they are using the protest to validate their own narrative. That protests and the same protests he's talking about over last several years, as we've seen the different waves. I would amend my statement that the protests escalated. I would have preferred to say that they were co-opted and just a little slip of a tongue, but it doesn't matter because that's not what they were picking at. But we've seen these protests co-opted and a narrative created and then fed back to the Iranian people through things like Iranian International. And so I think it's very rich of some people to tell me that I'm denying the agency of the Iranian people. Absolutely not. I think that actually, I agree that there are many issues, that economic issues, again, they don't exist in a vacuum. But yes, there is corruption. Yes, there are various laws that I would prefer not to be like, the way gender laws are, according to, these old things that were before women were working. It maybe made a little bit more sense in terms of distribution of inheritance and stuff like that. And as you said, many members of ICC are in favor of a secular government. But again, there's also many people in Iran. I have traveled to Iran. I haven't lived in Iran, but I've traveled to Iran several times over the years. And I've seen many people who, they support specific policies, or they might reject other policies. But the Iranian population is not homogeneous. And the people actually who lived through the revolution, my parents' generation, they understand what it means to be under foreign-backed rule. The Pahlavi rule was horrific. Everyone knows about the Savak police force that was very repressive, and many people support the Islamic Republic because it brought them things they didn't have before that. It brought, advancement to, the villages, and it allowed women to go to school that they weren't able to in the same way prior to that, because the majority of the Iranian population, like it or not, they still are religious. And they at that time, they wouldn't send their daughters to school, prior to the Islamic Republic. So there are historical reasons why the Islamic Republic came about the way it did, and it fit with the cultural situation in Iran. And now perhaps things are changing, and things move forward, sometimes gradually. A couple of years ago, I went to Iran, and my mom had been there prior to me going, and she said, half of the women in Iran, in Tehran, they don't wear hijab. And I didn't believe her. I had to go there myself and see. And it's true, they don't wear hijab. So I think even before the unfortunate tragic death of Mahsa Amini, in police custody, which ICC acknowledged as a tragedy. We always, we are for, we're not for repression. We hate, police violence. I mean, everyone who knows me would know that that I don't support, these problems that do occur. But some of these problems are not also unique to Iran. It's important to remember that because, oh my God, I saw an article that was talking about, it's not important. I think the source, it might have been a British news source, but they were saying, oh, they are using chemical weapons against the protesters. What does that mean? We use chemical weapons here. It's called CN gas or CS gas. I think there's a few of them, but it's used, I think, by police in many locations against internal protests, even though it's banned by Geneva Conventions. There's always this idea that Iran is this horrible, strange, it's Orientalism, right? Barbaric place. And it's not true. People live quite normal lives. Sorry, I kind of got away with my narrative.
You have far more experience of Iran than I do, but based on what I saw when I was in Iran, May of last year, a few weeks before the criminal war of aggression on the country by the USA and Israel, I mean, I was amazed too because of all the things that I had been told, to find so many women walking in the streets without any head covering, and no one was bothering them at all. And I saw so few police officers, just any police officers, and the ones that I saw, I couldn't see any weapon on them. And this was very disconcerting for me coming from the West, because in any major Western city today, I get the impression, almost any major Western city, that I'm living in a police state. There, in Athens, where I spend, a good bit of the year in Greece, there are cops everywhere in combat gear. They're all over the city. I didn't see any of that when I was in Tehran, and so these are observations which are completely ignored, and anybody can make them if they go to the country, but they're completely ignored by the corporate media. In any case, let's continue here and see what else this gentleman has to say.
So this is a continuation of those protests, and it has come to the point that the strong majority of the population felt that they could go on the streets and in millions and demand this end to the Islamic Republic. And to suggest that this was instigated by Israel or foreign forces is obviously offensive to the Iranian-Canadian community.
Now, Mona, he used the word instigated. In your opinion, did you intend to argue that they instigated the protests, or did you take another position when you spoke to Cochrane?
I think this is what they call a straw man argument. And I've seen it also in, what other people who are mad about what I said and the way they comment, everything is lies, but I absolutely didn't say it was instigated. And again, the word I would use was co-opted. I didn't say co-opted there, but that's the word I would use. I said that there are legitimate protests, and we saw something kind of riding on the back of that. And
as people just heard, you said they started as protests over legitimate grievances. So he's just flat out lying about what you said. This man's a professor at the University of Toronto. I think a linguistic.
Jordan Peterson was also a
professor at the University. This guy's a linguistic. You think he can understand, the English language? I mean, anyways, there's more to come. Unfortunately, here's what else he has to say.
I was surprised by some of the things that were said, and I quite honestly did not know what to do in that moment. And
I started laughing. I didn't know what to do. I paid the big bucks to be the star of the flagship.
Is it because I was right?
Yeah. And I was flummoxed when I was presented with something other than the narrative I was told to feed to people. Anyways, here's more.
And that was my failure, and that's where that went wrong. But help me understand something here, Arslan, and this is not, I'm not asking this to make myself feel better or look better, but the Iranian-Canadian Congress, and I've since learned how many people in the diaspora looks at this particular organization. They had standing at the foreign interference inquiry. I've seen them quoted in other media. How do they get standing at something like a foreign interference inquiry when you and so many others voice concern that essentially this organization supports the positions of the Iranian regime in practice and in word?
Now, I have to pause there and say something, Mona, because I was like the counsel, legal counsel, and I was doing it on a pro bono basis. I wasn't paid to do it for the Iranian-Canadian Congress in what he calls the foreign interference inquiry. So just to be clear, so everybody understands what that is, the Canadian government, the political elite, and the corporate media have been completely wound up for years about allegations of foreign interference in Canada's so-called democracy. And so under pressure from neocons and from CSIS, from the Canadian spy agency, the Trudeau government convened a massive inquiry into allegations of foreign interference in Canadian politics. And a number of organizations were applied to have some standing to make submissions to the commission. The Iranian-Canadian Congress was one of them. And I can tell you, this guy's not a lawyer. He's getting asked the question, how did the ICC get standing? He's in no position to explain that. I can explain that to you because I'm a damn lawyer. And you can't get standing in an inquiry of this nature or before any judicial proceeding unless the court comes to the conclusion based on the evidence available to it that it is a legitimate organization that has a significant contribution to make to the issues that are being reviewed by the tribunal or the court. And I reread the decision of the judge before I did this interview today, just to remind myself what she said. She did indeed come to those conclusions, even though the ICC filed its application to intervene very late. She says this, they're very, very late, but I still believe, based on the information that I have, that they have a useful contribution to make. And she also pointed out that there was another Iranian-Canadian organization that had already been granted standing. Do you recall that, Mona? And if so, can you tell us anything about that organization? I suspect that it has a different perspective on things than the ICC.
Oh, I don't remember the name of the organization, but I remember that I believe that they pushed for Iran to be added, to be considered, because they were talking about China and Russia, and I think India a little bit, but it was primarily focused on China and Russia. They wanted to add Iran to the list, and we had access to the very limited because a lot of stuff is redacted, but basically the summary of what CSIS said is that Iran has not intervened in Canadian elections at all.
Right.
So
indeed. So interestingly, so Cochrane, rather than taking the standing granted to the ICC by this foreign interference inquiry as an indication that the organization is legitimate, right? He just throws up his hands. I can't understand how they got standing, and asked the non-lawyer to explain it to him. And this is what the non-lawyer had to say.
Yes, so that's a great question. Maybe it would require a full program to discuss. But I can tell you that obviously, if anybody Googles Iranian-Canadian community, that's the first name that comes up. They are called the Iranian-Canadian Congress, so it's not a surprise that they're invited. But this is an organization of 300 members, and we're talking about a community of 300,000 people.
All right, so I'm sorry I have to intervene myself on this one, and I'll invite you to comment. So he said, remember at the outset that Cochrane said when he was groveling, we got hundreds of complaints, okay? He said hundreds.
Yeah.
This guy just said the ICC has hundreds of members. So somehow those hundreds of complaints are representative of a community consisting of 300,000 people, but the hundreds of people who are members of the ICC are not representative of these 300,000 people. Mona, what is the reality here about the ICC? What is your view about to what degree the ICC represents this large diaspora in Canada?
Mm-hmm. Of course, we can't represent the entire diaspora, but we try our best to have balanced, research statements when we put them out. And the ICC, we've had thousands of members over the years. They come and go, but there's also this immense pressure on us, as I said before. People and anyone who tries to, we invite people to our mental health series on Instagram. immediately they receive messages to not associate with us because we're associated with the regime. And despite this, we remain the largest Iranian-Canadian organization with a voting membership. I don't know of any others. If they wanted to, they could create one, and they could either join the ICC and push the elections toward candidates that they like. There was only one other candidate in the last election who lost, and the number of positions available on the board were filled by other candidates. And if they want, which they have done in the past, there have been other elections that have been more competitive. They can bring as many people as they want to unseat the current board. What they have chosen instead is to isolate the Iranian-Canadian Congress, which I don't think is working in their favor, because they haven't even created an alternative organization big enough to contest that. They could create one, and they can use SEO to bring their website higher than ours. I think that there are not enough people, or there are other tensions between them that so far we haven't seen.
Right. So
an alternative.
As you said at the outset, you just got to pay $20 to become a member of the ICC, and then you have the right to vote in the elections, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. So let's hear what else you have to say.
The fact of the matter is people distrust the organization, so they don't want to become members to try to change it because they don't believe there's going to be a fair election. There are lots of issues. And of course, our community also has to take responsibility for still allowing this for organization to go on. But the reality is, if you place them in the context of what they have done over the past 5-6 years and all the statements, it becomes clear the line of logic that they're following. I'm not suggesting that they're hired by the Islamic Republic. Absolutely not. The people that probably politically believe in have a particular political affiliation that makes them want to believe these kinds of stories. And we hear these stories from some individuals,
Yes, like Mike Pompeo and the Jerusalem Post and the Mossad. Yeah.
I said in my interview that they are endangering Iranian protests because they are, as we said in some other segment, that they're saying the quiet part out loud. And, if they were smart, but part of it may be there are some theories that the intention was to cause an escalation by deliberate escalation of clashes between protesters and or rioters between the to allow for the foreign interference and to create this narrative for the war mongering.
Well, I would suggest that the CIA and the Mossad want to endanger the protesters. It's exactly what they want. They want people who are peacefully protesting to be shot, and then they can justify, another military attack on the country.
Yeah, we talked about this before, and there's historical context for similar operations. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's watch this last bit, and then we'll talk about some subsequent developments.
So it's not like they don't exist at all. But they're within the Iranian-Canadian community. They're definitely, this is a fringe, type of, ideology. They are probably represent less than 0.5% of the Iranian-Canadian community population.
Well, Arslan, again, my apologies, and
there it is. 4 apologies, folks.
And please, my reassurance, the intention was to do an interview about the struggle and the oppression.
No, the intention was to do an interview about Western propaganda.
And obviously it didn't go that way. But thank you for reaching out and educating on this. And thank you for your time today. That's Arslan Kanamuyapur. We appreciate it, sir. Thank you for being here.
So, but why don't you go ahead if you have anything else to add before we talk about substance?
I love that he calls us fringe, and I don't know where he gets the 0.5 number or 5.5% or whatever he said. I love it.
I suspect I'm guessing here, but I think he might have been talking about the membership. The actual membership of the ICC is less than 0.5%.
Perhaps, but he calls our political opinions fringe, and let me tell you, it comes from a broad base of people with varied opinions. There are secular people, there are perhaps more conservative people with different beliefs, and I think we share values with many other Canadian organizations that are opposed to war, and a broad base of Canadian people. And I would like to add that the protests that we are seeing in Canada, going to the U.S. embassies and asking Trump to intervene in Iran, I've heard from friends, people around me who don't know anything about Iran, like, what's going on, and they're completely shocked to learn what these people are asking for. So, yeah, I would call that a fringe position for that.
So, following this turn of events, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs weighed in on the entire controversy, and here's what they had to say. We commend Dr. Arslan Khanemipour and the many Iranian Canadians who wrote to CBC to demand an honest portrayal of the protests and violence in Iran. Last week, Power and Politics platformed a spokesperson for an organization repeating Islamic regime talking points and blaming events on foreign governments. I would have thought that CIJA pays careful attention to what the Mossad is saying publicly, but apparently they are clueless. Anyways, CIJA goes on, says, yesterday, the doctor set the record straight, amplifying the voices of Iranian Canadians, many of whom have lost loved ones. While a host apologized, this points to a deeper systemic problem at the public broadcaster. The CBC must be held accountable and not to continue to platform voices claiming to represent Canadians while advancing narratives of the Islamic regime and the terror groups it supports. So apparently you were advancing a terrorist narrative, Mona. Apparently it seems that from CIJA's perspective, apologizing 4 times and groveling profusely is not sufficient. There has to be more punishment. What do you make of the fact that this organization is endorsing what Arslan had to say?
Well, we know CIJA, like they're not a voice that I can consider to take seriously. And yeah, it's interesting they didn't name the organization. Maybe they don't want people to find us and find our actual what we actually said, because they're including his video, not ours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it wasn't just CIJA. From when we're talking about the Zionist lobby, there was also this commentary from, well, they call themselves Honest Reporting Canada. It should be Dishonest Reporting Canada. And similarly, in a similar vein, they say, to his credit, Cochrane took full responsibility, saying that, quote, I expected an interview on the day, much like the one we are having here, talking about the regime cruelty and support for the protesters, and that's not what we delivered. And they then say... And
I did say I support the protesters to, at the end of my interview, I said I support the protesters to get their demands met, especially like afterwards. I saw some statement by like the bus workers union in Tehran, through legitimate means, not through the kind of violence that we saw afterwards, which, perhaps we should be careful to disaffiliate from the protesters.
Right. And so they go on here, second paragraph, Dishonest Reporting Canada says, while Cochrane laudably took responsibility for the previous interview and gave a platform to Khanemipour to set the record straight, it exposed a pattern at CBC of platforming fringe voices and falsely presenting them as being mainstream. So here too, this Zionist organization is saying, repeatedly apologizing and groveling is not enough. There has to be systemic change at the CBC. On this point, I personally am in complete agreement with them. There has to be systemic change at the CBC, but not of the kind they're seeking. The systemic change is you have to liberate this organization from the financial pressures and constraints imposed upon it by the corporatocracy, the billionaire class, and its servants in halls of power, so they can finally begin to do real journalism. So with that, I'd like to then close out by talking about some disturbing information which was brought to my attention about the ways in which the opponents of the ICC are targeting you and other members of the ICC. And I'm putting up on the screen here the homepage of an organization, or a website, I should say. I'm going to mispronounce it, Mona. It's mozdoriab.com. And you are apparently in this, the database they've established here, and here's your entry. And I understand that other members and past officials of the ICC are in here. What do you understand this website to be all about?
Yeah, so I don't think I had seen this particular website, but I had seen similar efforts to delegitimize the ICC and its individuals affiliated with the organization. Interestingly, there was a change.org petition that was petitioning the government of Canada and CSIS to investigate us, which is fascinating given that we did have standing in the Foreign Interference Commission directly working with the CSIS and the government. So sure, they can investigate us as much as they want. We have nothing to hide. But yeah, Mozdur is how do I explain it? It's a person who is like a tyrant, I think. Tyrant is so they're the tyrant seeker website. And it's very funny because I've seen other posts on Twitter about me, people, other people involved with the ICC, and others' voices similar to ours. And they post selective framing, half-truths, sometimes complete lies. And they can find me on the internet, sure. They found my LinkedIn. They contacted my employer to try to pressure my employer to fire me. They can do that all they want. Who is the Mozdur in this situation, right? These people, I guess they claim to be for democracy. I actually, as a result of these campaigns, I think not only did they attempt to make me lose my reputation with my employer, which my employer took those threats seriously. They told me that they encouraged me to contact the police regarding this, and they said these are threats and defamation against you, and they misunderstood what you were saying, or because they had a different political view, they took this approach. And they have crude techniques. My information is about my academic history, my work history. It's online, and there's nothing there for them. But I saw some people reaching my. I think they had contacted people who were in my networks and perhaps asked them why they were affiliated with me. So I received a couple of messages of people. Iranians who believed those lies and saying that they were disaffiliating me and they were ashamed of me. And in one case, I checked at the person's profile to see what they were posting, and they were reposting the campaign for democratic transition that will be led by Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah. And that's absolutely ridiculous. How can you think that the son of the former Shah, who himself has no credentials, to come and live in Iran and lead Iran to some form of democracy? That's not going to be the case, because we know that he has close ties to Israeli officials. We've seen many pictures of him with them, and he is pro-Israel. Those protests are pro-Israel, and they are bringing this foreign intervention to the sovereign nation of Iran, which we know the history. It's shocking to me when I try to figure out these people's logic, because they have they forgotten what has happened in the course of my life. Since I was a teenager, I saw Iraq, what happened to Afghanistan under U.S. President George Bush, Afghanistan, Iraq, now closer to now we have Libya, we have Syria more recently in the last year or so, I think, and we see the horrible situation that ensues after the war and foreign intervention. And if you're just 30 years old, you should know these things, and that's not what's going to come of this kind of intervention. It's not going to be a democratic government. It's going to be the destabilization of Iran and further the region.
I've become convinced that it's not just regime change they want. I think they want to actually destroy and dismember Iran, the United States, Israel, and other Western governments. I think what happened in Syria is a very good example of this. After they got in power, they removed Assad from power, and they got in power as somebody who's doing the bidding of Washington. They continued to bomb the country relentlessly. There's violence all over the country. They destroyed whatever capacity the country had to defend itself. The Syrian military was wiped out. And the United States continues to occupy large swaths of Syria. Israel now occupies even larger parts of Syria. So I think that their goal will be, if they were to, I don't think they're going to succeed in causing the government's demise in Iran. But if by any chance they succeeded, I think that they will then take it further and they will try to destroy the country completely, so that it will never be able to defend itself from Western dominance. Is that also your sense, Mona?
Absolutely. We know what's happening. And it's really rich of the United States to say they support protesters. We know what's happening with Minneapolis and ICE and the way they're treating their people at home. How can we expect Donald Trump to, as I said in the original interview, I don't trust Donald Trump. We can't be trusted to support and defend his own civilians. So how can we expect him to defend Iranian civilians? This narrative is completely messed up.
Yeah. And again, you're being restrained. I would have used it more.
I am being restrained. Sorry. I would like to throw a few expletives in there. But, yeah.
So I just want to conclude by sharing with our audience one of the rather ominous messages that you received. And somebody who goes by the name of Reza. Do you know who this person is, Reza Ghazi, Mona?
I don't know him. I think some of ICC members might know him, but not all of the posts were by people that had a public profile. Sometimes it was a sort of an anonymous account, especially the ones that are publishing addresses of affiliates of mine.
So he says that true Iranians will deal with all of you when the right time comes. Your days, is a typo there, but your days are numbered. I understand you've communicated with the police about some of these more threatening messages. How did that go?
Yes, I have on advice of my employer, because they told me they would not release the emails they received to me due to confidentiality issues. And they said they would send it directly to the police. So I went to the police to see, because there was no direct threat in these messages. So as I kind of expected, they told me that because there's no criminal action taken, they cannot open an investigation. And actually, I fully respect that, because my goal is not for my community to be monitored. I respect people to have different opinions, and so I was actually quite satisfied with that response. But at the same time, these are, they're carefully phrased, sort of not direct threats, but they're intended to try to get us to shut up. As one person directly told, someone close to me had responded to some of their comments, saying that my narrative was all lies, saying that I had directly cited Israeli sources, and the person's response to that was simply two words, shut up. And that's what they want. They want to shut us up. Unfortunately, they won't be able to do that. And I think in a way, their efforts have actually strengthened us. It has drawn the fact that CBC retracted the issue. Like now, various actually honest reporters on the internet are paying attention to it. So I'm hopeful that our voice will actually be amplified through these vile efforts to shut down our voice.
Well, thank you very, very much for joining us today, Mona. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I hope I'm going to share this video with Mr. Cochrane on social media. I hope that if he does listen to us, he will give you an opportunity to come back onto Power and Politics to respond to this scurrilous attack from this linguistics professor who didn't even have the integrity to disclose that he had formerly been a president of the ICC. And also for my audience's benefit, because we were talking about how a number of these opponents of the Iranian government in Canada do support the son of the Shah and Israel, I'm going to put a link to a recent report I did from a protest in Montreal by opponents of the government of Iran. And you can see for yourself what they had to say about the son of the Shah and about Israel. And I do commend that report to you. In any case, we're signing off for today. Thank you again, Mona. And we'll continue to follow this important story very closely.